Moving into a new home is supposed to be a fresh start, a new chapter in life. For me and Emily, our quaint house in the quiet suburbs seemed like the perfect place to begin that chapter. We had spent years saving up, dreaming about a place of our own where we could build our future together. The house was everything we wanted. Charming, spacious, and nestled in a neighborhood that felt safe and welcoming. But as the days turned into nights, the initial excitement began to fade, replaced by a sense of unease I couldn't quite explain. During the day, the house was serene, almost idyllic. Sunlight streamed through the windows, filling the rooms with warmth. The sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze gave the impression of peace. However, when the sun set and the house was enveloped in darkness, it felt different, oppressive, almost as if the walls were closing in on us. The silence was the worst part. It was thick and heavy, pressing down on me like a weight. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind seemed amplified, echoing through the empty rooms. I told myself it was just my imagination, that we were simply adjusting to the new environment. Emily seemed to be handling it better than I was, always brushing off my concerns with a laugh and a reassuring smile. Still, there was something about the house that unsettled me. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone, that something unseen was lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting. At night, as we lay in bed, I would often find myself staring into the darkness, straining to hear any unusual sounds. The silence would stretch on, broken only by the occasional distant howl of a dog or the rustling of the trees outside. I wanted to talk to Emily about it, to share my fears, but I didn't want to worry her. She was so happy, so content with our new life, and I didn't want to ruin that. So, I kept my fears to myself, convincing myself that they were just the product of an overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, and it wouldn't be long before the house revealed its true nature, plunging us into a nightmare we couldn't escape. It was a little after midnight when it happened. I had fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep, exhausted from the move and the countless tasks that came with settling into a new home. Suddenly, I felt a sharp jab in my side. I groaned and rolled over, only to find Emily staring at me with wide, fearful eyes. "Jake, wake up! What are you doing?" she whispered urgently, her voice trembling. I blinked, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. "What do you mean?" "I'm right here," I replied, confusion evident in my tone. Emily sat up, clutching the sheets to her chest. "I saw someone at the end of the bed. They were just standing there, watching us." A chill ran down my spine. I turned my head to look at the foot of the bed, but there was nothing there, only the dark outline of the furniture and the dim shapes of our unpacked boxes. "There's no one here, Emily. You must have had a bad dream," I said, trying to sound reassuring even though my heart was pounding in my chest. She shook her head, her eyes never leaving the spot where she claimed to have seen the figure. "It wasn't a dream, Jake. I know what I saw." I reached out and took her hand, feeling the cold sweat on her skin. "It's okay. Maybe it was just a shadow or something. The mind can play tricks on you when you're tired." Emily reluctantly nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She lay back down, and I pulled her close, hoping to comfort her. But as we settled back into the silence of the night, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. I kept my eyes open, staring into the darkness, trying to convince myself that it was all just a figment of her imagination. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted back to sleep. But Emily's fear had planted a seed of doubt in my mind, one that would continue to grow with each passing night. I tried to push it aside, to tell myself that there was a logical explanation for what she saw. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the creeping sense of dread that had taken hold of me. And so, the seed of fear was planted, waiting to sprout into something far more terrifying than either of us could have imagined. A few nights passed without incident, and I began to think that maybe Emily's vision had indeed been just a bad dream. But then, it happened to me. It was well past midnight when I found myself in the midst of a vivid, horrifying dream. I was lying in bed, unable to move, my body paralyzed by an unseen force. The room was dark, yet I could make out the silhouette of a figure standing at the foot of the bed. My heart raced as I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The figure moved closer, and I saw it more clearly. Its features were indistinct, cloaked in shadow, but the sheets were unmistakably twisted around its neck, like a noose. Panic surged through me as I watched, helpless, while it seemed to struggle against the tightening fabric. The air in the room grew thick, making it hard to breathe. I jolted awake, my body drenched in sweat. The room was dark, but my eyes were immediately drawn to the foot of the bed. For a heart-stopping moment, I saw it, the shadowy figure, just as it had appeared in my dream. The sheets were twisted around its neck, and it seemed to be staring directly at me. I blinked, and the figure vanished, leaving me gasping for breath. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I turned to Emily, who was still sound asleep beside me. Shaking her gently, I whispered, "Emily, wake up. You need to wake up." She stirred, rubbing her eyes. "What is it, Jake?" "I saw it," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "The figure you saw. I just had the same dream." Emily's eyes widened in fear. "Are you sure? You saw the sheets around its neck?" I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Exactly the same. It was right there at the end of the bed." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared experience settling over us like a dark cloud. It was no longer just a dream, not something that could be easily dismissed. We were both seeing the same terrifying figure, and that could only mean one thing: whatever it was real. "What do we do?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "We need to find out more about this house. There has to be a reason we're both seeing the same thing. We need to know what we're dealing with." Emily nodded, and we held each other close, trying to draw some comfort from each other's presence. But as the night stretched on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the shadowy figure was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The morning after our shared nightmare, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table, bleary-eyed and filled with a sense of dread. The sun's light streaming through the windows did little to dispel the shadows that seemed to cling to every corner of the house. We knew we had to do something, and the first step was to uncover the history of our home. We began our investigation online, searching for any records or articles about the house and its previous occupants. It didn't take long before we stumbled upon something that made our blood run cold. An old news article detailed the mysterious death of the previous tenant, a man named Mr. Thompson. According to the report, Mr. Thompson had been found dead in the very bedroom we now slept in. The cause of death was strangulation, and the police had found him with the bed sheets twisted tightly around his neck, just as we had seen in our nightmares. The more we read, the clearer it became that Mr. Thompson's death was shrouded in mystery. There were no signs of forced entry, and no evidence pointing to foul play. The authorities had eventually ruled it as an accidental death, though the circumstances were highly unusual. Emily and I exchanged worried glances. The description of Mr. Thompson's death matched our nightmares too perfectly to be a coincidence. We decided to dig deeper, hoping to find more information that might explain the terrifying events we were experiencing. We visited the local library and scoured old newspapers and public records. With each piece of information we uncovered, the picture grew darker. Neighbors had reported strange occurrences in the house even before Mr. Thompson's death. Unexplained noises, shadows moving in the corners of their vision, and an oppressive feeling that hung in the air. Some speculated that the house was cursed or haunted, but those claims had been dismissed as superstitions. As we pieced together the story, we learned that Mr. Thompson had been a reclusive man, keeping mostly to himself. He had no family or close friends, and little was known about his life before he moved into the house. However, one detail stood out. In the weeks leading up to his death, Mr. Thompson had confided in a neighbor about experiencing vivid nightmares. He claimed that a shadowy figure would visit him each night, standing at the foot of his bed, watching him with eyes that seemed to burn with malice. Emily and I sat in stunned silence, the gravity of our situation sinking in. We were not just dealing with a series of frightening dreams. We were caught in a cycle of terror that had claimed a life before us. The shadowy figure, the twisted sheets, the feeling of being watched. It was all connected to Mr. Thompson's demise. "We have to find a way to stop this," Emily said, her voice shaking but determined. "We can't let whatever happened to Mr. Thompson happen to us." I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. We needed to find a way to break the cycle, to rid our home of the malevolent presence that haunted us. But how? The answer was out there, buried in the shadows of our house's dark history, and we were determined to find it no matter the cost. The days that followed our discovery were a blur of fear and sleepless nights. The nightmares, once sporadic, began to happen almost every night, each one more terrifying than the last. It was no longer just the figure at the end of the bed. Now it moved closer, its dark presence pressing down on us with a suffocating weight. I could feel its cold breath on my skin, hear the sinister whispers that filled the room. But the worst part was the eyes, burning with an intense hatred, fixed on us as if marking us for some unspeakable fate. Emily and I tried everything we could think of to protect ourselves. We prayed, we sprinkled salt around the bed, we even slept with the lights on, but nothing seemed to make a difference. Every night, the figure returned, and every night, the sheets twisted tighter around our necks. The lack of sleep and the constant terror were taking their toll. Emily looked pale and exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a haunted, fearful look. I wasn't much better, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. We were growing more desperate by the day. The haunting was no longer confined to our dreams. It began to seep into our waking hours as well. Shadows moved in the corners of our vision, objects shifted positions when we weren't looking, and an oppressive, icy cold settled over the house. It felt as if the very walls were closing in on us, trapping us in a cycle of endless fear. One evening, as we sat in the living room, trying to muster the courage to face another night, Emily broke down in tears. "Jake, I can't take this anymore. We need to leave. We need to get out of this house before it kills us." I wanted to agree with her, to pack our bags and never look back, but something held me back. "Emily, what if it follows us? What if leaving doesn't stop it?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and resignation. "Then what do? We can't keep living like this. It's going to drive us insane." I knew she was right. We couldn't go on like this, but leaving felt like running away from a problem that would just follow us wherever we went. We had to find a way to break the cycle, to confront whatever malevolent presence was haunting us and end it once and for all. That night, as we lay in bed, dreading the moment sleep would overtake us, I had an idea. "Emily, what if we try to communicate with it? Find out what it wants?" She looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "Jake, you can't be serious. You want to talk to that thing?" I nodded, a sense of grim determination settling over me. "We have to do something. Maybe if we understand what it wants, we can find a way to stop it." Reluctantly, Emily agreed, and we decided to try and reach out to the spirit the next night. As we drifted off to sleep, the familiar cold settled over the room, and the shadowy figure appeared once more. But this time, instead of recoiling in fear, I forced myself to sit up, my voice trembling as I spoke. "What do you want from us?" The figure paused, its burning eyes fixed on me. For a moment, the room was deathly silent, and then, in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the grave, it spoke. "Justice." Emily and I exchanged a terrified glance. What did it mean? Who was it seeking justice for? As the figure began to fade, its presence lingering like a cold, dark stain, we realized that we had to dig deeper into the house's past. There was more to this story, more to uncover, and only by understanding the full truth could we hope to break free from this nightmare. The realization hit us like a punch to the gut. We were trapped in a cycle of terror, orchestrated by a malevolent presence seeking something from us that we didn't yet understand. But now, at least, we had a direction. We would uncover the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be, and we would find a way to end this haunting once and for all.